We're here at the Renaissance of Marriage Conference 2018 with our keynote speaker, Dr. Gregory Bottaro. Dr. Greg, Catholicism and psychology are not often two categories that go together, but you have a special interest that integrates Catholic philosophy and theology with psychology. How did you come about this? How did you discover that this was a need? And what has been the impact of your work, especially through the Catholic Psych Institute?
Well, I kind of stumbled into this integration unknowingly. I came to know the Catholic faith through the writings of John Paul II. And as I was reading his work, I started with Love and Responsibility and then ultimately Theology of the Body. I read them as a manual of psychology. It really made sense to me that what he was describing and what he was explaining is a blueprint for understanding our humanity. And if we're going to help people through an understanding of humanity and psychology to get better, then this is the best blueprint to use because this is the way God made us. And so I didn't realize that most of psychology doesn't have an accurate blueprint. And as I started to learn more about psychology and then pursue the field at the graduate level and the doctorate level, then I realized that, wow, this has been missing from the field for, hundreds of years. So the integration for me was much more natural. I started from the Catholic perspective and then kind of brought in the science and brought in some of the discoveries from the field of psychology. And the philosophy and the theology gave me a great way to sort of discern which findings from the science made sense and the theories. And if there was some part of theory that didn't make sense, we can kind of cut that out and we can understand why we need to cut it out. And then we can bring it even further because we have this background from the Catholic faith. So it's been called the adequate anthropology in terms of John Paul II's work. So this adequate anthropology is the understanding of the human person that the Catholic faith gives us and then helps us to see, number one, what's the ideal who we're created to be, specifically in the person of Christ as a model. And then number two, then we can measure disorder against that. And so we can help people move closer and closer towards the ideal. And so that's now the practice that I formed, the Catholic Psych Institute. We're working to integrate that in many different ways, specifically through the therapy that we provide, and then also in kind of creating resources that'll help bridge the gap between the field of psychology and our emotional lives and the way that plays out in marriage and family in many different places, the workplace, and our faith. So that our faith is not just something we practice at church on Sundays, but it's actually our life that we live every day. It's very easy for us in ministry to want to have an easy answer, an easy resource, an easy tool. And when we find something, especially that pitches itself as, empirically validated, this is something that's been tested, this is what works, I get really uncomfortable with that. Not because I don't agree that it's empirically validated. Prepare and Enrich has put hundreds of thousands of dollars into research. And it's really impressive, actually, what they've done to validate the data. However, it's not Catholic. It's not Catholic because it's not personal. It's literally not Catholic. They have sort of like a Catholic module, but it doesn't mean that it's actually Catholic. There's a question in there about how do you, I don't remember the answers specifically, but the options, but it's how would you describe the ideal marriage? And one of the answers is hierarchical, one of them is egalitarian, and the right answer, I think, is egalitarian. That's wrong. Now, of course, we're equal in dignity. There are very important roles of a man and very important roles of a woman that we understand through Catholic faith and the beauty of the integration of all truth, including scientific truth and the truth we have by faith. When we integrate them, we see that the man's brain is very different from a woman's brain. So we are not supposed to expect that all the same exact things happen in all the same exact ways between a man and a woman. And we all know that implicitly. But then it becomes politicized, and then it becomes, all this stuff. So I like it for a tool in the toolbox. But I get uncomfortable when it becomes sort of like the almighty inventory. When I wrote my inventory, I specifically said we are not going to validate it. This is my theory based on what I think is important to start a conversation, period. We're not going to call it something that it can never be. And so that's what's different about it. It's also, that means that it can be free. We haven't had to put hundreds of thousands of dollars into studying it. So, it's free from those strings attached. And so you can really kind of engage it in that way. In a lot of ways, some of the questions are very similar. In fact, I was trained in Prepare and Enrich after I wrote my inventory, but I got a letter from the legal department of Prepare and Enrich after, and they said, we want to evaluate a little more closely how well you know Prepare and Enrich when you wrote your inventory. Because, a lot of this stuff is just generic questions about relationships. So in a lot of ways, they're similar, just don't take it too far. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Batara. I read in the Bureau of Statistics up to 80% of married couples have previously lived together. In your experience, do they face any different challenges compared to a couple who haven't lived together, and how can we help them through that?
Oh, that's a great question. The differences, that's a loaded question. The differences are going to be based on why they're not living together. So, I wouldn't necessarily structure the sort of comparison that way. Because we'd have to understand why are they not living together. If they're not living together because they take their faith seriously, they know what to expect, they know what marriage is all about, and so they make the decision not to live together, then certainly they're going to have very different kinds of challenges than a couple who doesn't know those things. So it's not just living together or not. However, obviously, most of the time, the numbers of those who are living together don't take their faith seriously, don't understand the importance of marriage, and they don't see the value of the vow. And they're not discerning marriage. Again, the marriage, the vow, the day that you say yes, the day that you say, I give now my whole life, I'm dying to self, you should probably go on the next day with something being different. And yet these couples who are living together, they're in their apartment together, they're getting Chinese, they're hanging out with takeout, and they're watching their TV. The next day, they get dressed up, they go to the church, they do this stuff, they have their party. The day after, they're back in their apartment, they're eating their Chinese takeout, and they're watching their TV together. What changed? Nothing. Nothing changes, practically, experientially in their relationship. When you don't have the vow, you don't have the sacrament. When you don't have the sacrament, you don't have the sacramental grace. When you don't have the sacramental grace, you're doomed to failure. The sacramental grace, this is what's amazing about our church. The sacramental grace is very specific to the sacrament. I used to think sacramental grace is like water. It's just like this, this nourishing sort of spring, and it just flows out on us, right? But really each sacrament has a different grace that flows through it to help us in our path. So when you go to confession, you received a particular grace that actually helps you heal the wound that is causing the sin. Well, when in marriage, there are specific graces that are listed in the catechism. I usually hold up my catechism at this point in a talk like this, and it's the little green Australian publication of the catechism, which I love. Is everybody familiar with that? In America, that's like a big deal, because the American publication of the catechism is this like big, thick thing, and we think it's so great. The Australian catechism is this like pocket edition. It's great. So if you have the catechism, open it up to number 1642, and write that down and look it up later. But it talks about the specific graces that God pours out through Christ to us in the sacrament of marriage, that Christ accompanies us and gives us the strength to pick up our crosses and follow him, so to die to self, to rise after we've fallen, to receive his grace of forgiveness, to be able to forgive each other. A really important one, to bear one another's burdens. Going back to mental illness, how many marriages suffer and ultimately crumble because of one spouse's burdens that are overwhelming and cannot be borne by the other? There is a supernatural power, a grace that God gives us. So he's basically saying to us, I know you're not going to be able to do that, just like from earlier. Apart from me, you can do nothing. I know you're not going to be able to deal with the fact that her father abused her when she was a child. I know you're not going to be able to deal with the fact that he didn't have a good role model for a father. And he's going to have no idea how to be a dad or how to love you as his wife. I know. That's why I'm giving you the grace, the help, the supernatural power. You specifically have this grace. Bear one another's burdens. There it is. It's in the sacrament. Now, to live the sacrament, it has to be a free, total, and faithful gift of self. It's not free when you've been already sleeping together and you've been developing all this emotional cloudiness and not discerning, actually making a gift of self to each other. Right? So there are ways that the vows are restricted or broken or weakened. And there's ways that the sacramental grace is not really present in the sacrament of marriage. It's like going to confession. If certain words aren't said, if certain things aren't present, there's no sacrament that occurs. A priest can't raise, a slice of pizza and say, this is my body. No, it's not. So there are elements that need to be present. And in those cases, most of the time when a couple's living together, they're not really entering into that and really thinking clearly through that. And so therefore, their sacrament is going to be weakened and hindered, and they're going to have a really tough go at it. In terms of suitability and like being a couple, people have that sort of idea of, my soulmate, I have to find the right one. That's totally wrong. Obviously, in retrospect, we can look back and say, this is the person God preordained from all time and eternity. Now you know because you made the vow. But that's not how we go into the discernment process. And ultimately, things like arranged marriages are valid. Yeah. And there's a significant cultural preparation and depth of worldview and understanding that's necessary for an arranged marriage to make sense. But a person who's in that arrangement knows the choice they're making, and they're entering into that vow. And that's sort of been educated and bred into them from the beginning, so they know what they're about to do. And in most of those cases, there's great fidelity and there's great living out of the vows. So suitability, it's a big question, and it's wrong to think about it in terms of a soulmate. I also am not saying you should be able to just go pluck anybody off the street and just go live the rest of your life together if your mindset is in the right place. But it's somewhere in between, and that requires a lot of discernment. It requires a closeness with God, being able to have prayerfulness, in your own maturity and your own spiritual development, and you grow closer in understanding, am I ready to number one, know who I'm with, and make the decision that I can die to self for this person that I'm with. In that first part, chastity becomes a real block to seeing who this person really is. Or immature expectations become a block for seeing who this person really is. But if you've gotten to that point of personal formation and maturity, that you can be confident in knowing who this person is and that you want to make the choice to die to self, then by all means, you're ready. So in my work as a Catholic clinical psychologist, my desire, my aim, my vocation is to bring peace to people who are suffering. I walk with people on the path of life, which is often filled with many types of suffering. And really, we're all suffering in different ways. We all have burdens. We all have crosses that we're carrying. And what I find is the most effective way to help people is to carry on this message of God, to pass on his message through Christ, that he invites us to trust him. It's really as simple as that. He is offering you this proposal to trust him. And there's lots of spiritualities and programs and all sorts of teachings and things that can be developed and have been developed out of that. One in particular that I really connect with and enjoy sharing is the abandonment to divine providence. And so this is a whole explanation of how trusting God actually changes our life. Now, Jesus doesn't just propose the idea, he commands us. In Matthew 6:25, he says, do not be anxious about the things of your life. He doesn't say maybe kind of think about it. If you have some time, maybe wonder if it's okay to stop worrying. He says, do not be anxious about the things of your life. And yet, we good Catholics who, observe Lenten practices for the most part and go to church and all that, yet we get in our car and we're driving in traffic and we're anxious. And we're late for something and we get anxious. And so we're not really connecting our faith with our emotional life. But if we really take our faith seriously and live our faith and really take seriously that Jesus commanded us not to worry, then that should mean we're living that way all the time. And so I've used mindfulness, which is, the current fad, and it's a good way to think about the way the mind works. I've used it as a vehicle to introduce a deeper way to grow in trust of God's providence. And we discover that no matter what the suffering is in your life, whether it's being late for a meeting or in traffic, or losing a loved one, losing a child, going through a divorce, living in a place where the law has changed radically against Catholic values, no matter the situation, it's an all or nothing proposition from God. Trust him. All will be well. He's conquered death. There's nothing else we have to worry about. So that sounds lovely, it's abstract, it's spiritual, but we can make it practical. And so what happens in our brains, we start worrying, we go off in sort of anxious thinking. We can control what we focus on, and we can actually get our minds out of those gutters. Why? Because we believe we're taken care of no matter what. So it's okay to let go of the anxious worry. And so I'm going to lead you in just a brief exercise here. This is just a little taste, a little introduction. I do a whole 8-week course. So obviously can't sum that up in 3 minutes. But this is sort of the essence of what we do. It culminates in learning how to trust more deeply in God's providence. So if everybody could, go ahead and put your materials down next to you. And everybody have it stand up out of your seat. And if you will, close your eyes. And stand upright, remembering that you are a child of God the Father, the creator of the universe, who is all-knowing. He knows you intimately. He's all-powerful. He created this all, and he has it all in his hands. And he's all-loving. He's intimately enamored with you. You are his child, and you have nothing to worry about. And you're made with infinite dignity. So stand up a little straighter right now. Stand with the dignity of being a child of God. Even if you're an adult, you're really a child. Even if you're an archbishop, you're really a child. And just take a breath right now. And as you breathe in, feel the physical sensation of the breath. Letting your focus shift away from whatever's going on in your mind right now to the physical sensation of breath in your body. And listen to the words of the prayer that we start every exercise with. Ever-present God, here with me now. Help me to be here with you. Ever-present God, here with me now. Help me to be here with you. Ever-present God, here with me now. Help me to be here with you. And as you breathe in, continue to focus your attention on the physical sensation of breath. You can choose to focus on the air coming in your nose or your mouth, or the expansion and contraction of your chest, or deeper in your belly, feeling your diaphragm pulling in the air and expelling it out. Just let your mind rest there in the physical sensation. And even if a thought comes into your mind, it's okay if it does. The mind thinks thoughts the way that the heart beats. You can't expect or want it to stop thinking. It will continue thinking. But you can choose where to focus your attention. And you can easily move your focus away from your thoughts back to your body, back to your breath. Now call to mind again the presence of God here with us now. He's as real in this room as any person around you. even more so. He's really here with you, and he really does know you. And you and he are in this infinite and intimate relationship. In fact, long after the breath that you're focusing on in this body ceases to exist, after the breath is gone, the I that you experience, the self that can be aware of the breath, will still exist. You will exist and he will exist, and you'll be together. Know that that relationship is eternal, and it's beyond whatever is happening in this moment, whatever worries or concerns you have. Because he's bigger than all of this, and because the love between you is bigger than all of this, you can let yourself not be in control through your thoughts and worries. You can let go of control and let him be in control and trust him. So focus once again your attention to your breath in your body. And feel for a moment your feet touching the floor. Pay attention to that physical sensation. Maybe for the first time realizing that you have feet touching the floor right now. And then as you breathe in, let your breath come into your whole body, experiencing the physical sensation of your whole body. And as you exhale, breathe out from your whole body. Again, simply and gently escorting your focus of attention away from any thoughts that plague your mind, and just returning gently back to your body. Ever-present God, here with me now. Help me to be here with you. All right, thank you. If you can gently open your eyes and go ahead and have a seat.
It's been said that marriage is on the attack worldwide as well. Secular media has distorted its meaning, and governments have passed laws that make marriage open to abuse in many forms. Why do you think that this National Catholic Leadership Conference, Renassince of Marriage, is important? And what kind of immediate and long-term effects do you think it will have on participants?
Sure, well, it's absolutely essential that we have an answer that makes sense to the world. So I think a lot of times we get pulled into the argument, and it's a trap. We get pulled into the media's way of looking at things, the world's way of looking at things, and we're expected to give an answer on their terms. And it's a trap. So instead of just coming up with the right argument, I like to look at it a little differently. We have to discover the truth and the beauty of the Catholic model, the Catholic vision, the sacramental vision. And so if we can discern, discover, and then be able to teach the beauty of the sacramental model of marriage, it kind of goes beyond the argument. It makes the argument sort of unessential. And it'll just attract people who want more. And so, yeah, you might get bogged down, caught up in the nitty-gritty of the argument, but then you realize at the end of the day, the heart longs for something more than what the world is presenting. And so if we provide this model, then it will resonate with what people are really desiring. So this conference, the Renassince of Marriage, and the teachings of the church being able to be sort of formulated and presented in that way, I think is essential to the whole process of evangelization and living the best life possible.
Thank you, Dr. Greg.
Absolutely.
Shalom World Television is coming to Australia. This is a great gift. It's been gifted to many parts of the world, and now it's our Australian turn to receive it with open arms. I welcome it, I bless it. It's going to really support family life, married life, youth, give us a resource that we know that we need really help in great help in these areas. May Almighty God bless this new resource coming to our land, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Shalom World, God's own channel.